Christos Anesti, Christ is risen, Christos Voskres. Greetings from my holy metropolis of Pittsburgh. I'm speaking to you from the chapel of St. Photios here, and the discerning eye may recognize that the icons here are by the hand of Fotis Kondorou. One of my predecessors here was discerning enough to acquire these icons for the Templo in the late 50s. And I am the happy beneficiary of his investment, as it were. We have St. Photios and St. John the Baptist, as well as Christ and the Theotokos. Again, I would have been happier presenting this to you face to face, but circumstances conspired to prevent me from doing that. I'm happy that the technology allows for my participation from a distance. I'm coming to you not as an academician, not as a specialist, not as and my talk is not specifically theological. I'm really speaking to you from my own personal experience. I take it that I was invited to address this forum because I have a kind of a internet presence. I mean, people are aware of my internet activity, and that's gratifying to a degree. It's also the cause of concern to me, because what I'm doing is carrying out a kind of experiment. And experiments don't always succeed. And so in some instances, what I'm doing is failing in public. And but I hope that my failures will add to the enterprise that we're all engaged in, and that is perfecting a means of engaging pastorally by means of social media. I called my talk Through a Glass Darkly because, in a sense, I think that's what is happening when we engage with each other by means of social media. There's an obscurity despite the kind of clarity of vision that we can sometimes achieve through means such as this. There nonetheless remains an inability to connect because of various limitations of the media. And so I was reminded of St. Paul's language in 1 Corinthians. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. For now I know in part, but then I shall know even as I am known. In the original, Βλέπομεν γαρ άρτη διεσόπτρου εν ενίγματι, τότε δε πρόσωπον προς πρόσωπον. Άρτη γινώσκω εκ μέρους, τότε δε επιγνώστομε καθώς και επεγνώστη. So what we're doing is always affected by our the limitations of the medium that we're using, but also our own personal limitations. I want to reflect a little about my journey. I've been on Facebook now, which is my primary form of interacting on the internet since the summer of 2000. So it's going on 8 years. And finally, I became aware of Facebook. I never heard it before until I was at a youth conference, the Second International Youth Conference, sponsored by the Ecumenical Patriarchate, that took place in Constantinople in the summer, in July of 2007. A young Greek-American participant approached me after one of the presentations and remarked that I had a Facebook fan page. Was I aware of that? And I had no idea what he was talking about, and I asked him to expound on that. And he told me, there's this phenomenon, Facebook, and people post things on it and converse about, and the whole thing struck me as strange and a little threatening, quite honestly. And they instructed me as to how to get on, and I saw that, yes, somebody, in fact, it was the young man himself, had put up a fan page, asking people to demonstrate their support of my Episcopal ministry by clicking like. And I saw that had been also set up for other Orthodox bishops, but that no bishops had yet engaged in the whole enterprise. So I thought, well, let me jump in and see what this is all about. And in a short time, I had amassed thousands of friends, for lack of a better word. I've come to appreciate that we should really make a distinction between friends and acquaintances and, for the most part, strangers. I certainly don't know 5,000 people with the that I can address with ease as friends. And some of my many friends have never really engaged with me over the course of their long relationship with me. It's only when I threatened to trim down my community, as it were, by asking people if they really do want to stay on, or would they allow me to drop them and let others who are waiting on a waiting list of 3,000, if I could bring them on instead. Do I get a deluge of people writing to me saying, please don't drop me. I don't participate, but I appreciate the opportunity to learn from the things that you post. Because that's pretty much how I treat my Facebook page. My Facebook page is just really a page about what I'm interacting with, what I'm reading. After I get up in the morning and I begin with my morning prayers, I turn on the internet and I look around the world for what's happening, and particularly for what's happening that has any relevance for the church. Specific ecclesiastical events or statements, and first and foremost specific to Orthodoxy, and then to church communities, Christianity at large, and to other religions beyond that, and not necessarily specifically theological happenings or ecclesiastical happenings, but where church and culture, or church and politics, or church and science interact. And I post stories not necessarily because I agree with what I'm reading, but for the sake of conversation. Initially, people imagined that whatever I was posting was a form of endorsement. But I think over time I've trained my friends, as it were, to understand that what I'm posting is an invitation to converse. Because that's really what I want my particular space to be all about. And that is, I want it to be a safe place for people to exchange opinions civilly. And because my virtual flock, as it were, is made up, I really don't know how many of them are Orthodox. There are people of all faiths and some of no faith. And that creates an interesting dynamic, because I have to moderate the kind of shrill discussions. Some people assuming that because I'm an Orthodox bishop, my space is a peculiarly Orthodox space, will come in and speak in an inappropriate manner about other kinds of Orthodox or other kinds of Christians or people beyond Christianity. And I have to remind them that, the people who are participating in this conversation include Jews, include Muslims, include Uniats or Eastern Rite Catholics, and that their message is being hampered by the temper with which they present it. So, in any event, what I'm trying to say is that there were no rules when I first came on. In fact, there was a suspicion about the rightness of doing such a thing. That although the Orthodox Church was very quick to engage the internet per se, I think one of the great early surprises was discovering that Mount Athos, the holy mountain, had a website where the doors would open and you could drag a candle from the candle stand and light a candle and leave it in the sand there as a prayer, while Byzantine chanting was emanating from the image. I thought that was a kind of an endorsement of Orthodox engagement on the internet. But social media is not just about putting out a message on a web page. It's about in talking about that message, interacting with that message. And so there's a more personal component to it. It's not just that we add to the great virtual library of information that seekers can find. It's that we are out there in the give and take of conversations relating to the faith. As I said, there weren't models to follow. You know, we were, those of us who were early pioneers as you know, in a sense, those of us who came into this early on and recognized that there was the possibility of good things here, were pretty much left to our own devices. And I am not one who develops content, as it were. I don't create content. I direct people's attention to content. You know, I shop around at all the other Orthodox sites and Orthodox aggregators and pull articles out and ask my people to reflect on them or to visit other sites. You know, I think of myself as a kind of portal to other Orthodox sites as well as to other news sites in general. And I present myself flaws and all, you know, and I have a strategy for that. I know that I run the risk of scandalizing from time to time, and in fact, I believe I have scandalized some people, and I am grateful for the feedback when I go too far, and I'm trying to, as I say, learn by doing and correct for whatever missteps I've made. But for the most part, I want to present myself as a traveler along the way. That is, I know I have the guiding principles of the gospel and of Christ and the Orthodox faith, and I'm unwavering in my faith in them. But I don't have an answer for everything at any given moment. And I, too, have to struggle with certain new situations that arise in this ever-changing world. And I invite others to converse with me about that. I also want to present myself as not someone distant from or unlike the world at large, but somebody who has interests outside the narrowly defined ecclesiastical interests. I mean, that I have musical interests, I have literary interests, I have interests in cinema, I have interests in any number of things, and I'm happy to share them as a kind of enticement, really, as a way of saying, you know, I know where you're coming from, I know the world you live in, I know the things you like, or, you know, I mean, I like the things you like, but let's talk about them. And as a way of creating a kind of sense of relationship that allows for the possibility of further conversation. Not all that conversation happens in public. I very often am addressed privately by people asking for specific kinds of direction for prayer. That's probably the principal form of private communication I get. People ask me to pray for their loved ones at the proskomidi. People asking about guidance in personal matters or guidance with regards to the Orthodox Church, people who are inquirers and want to be directed. And I'm happy to say that among my friends is an Anglican who several years ago began engaging with me and is now a priest ordained for one of my parishes in West Virginia, having left his seminary and gone to our Holy Cross Seminary. And this is the 1-year anniversary of his ordination to the priesthood, and he is now serving under my omoforion. There are others whose baptisms I have performed. There are people whose children I have baptized or who I have married. So real relationships have been created by means of this. But there are challenges, and there are the challenges of misinterpretation, of the politicization of the message, of naivete, of going into complicated situations without counting the cost, without realizing the complexity of the situation. There's the challenge of scandalizing. There's the challenge of one's own limited knowledge. So I am appreciative of the effort that the organizers of this symposium, this conference, have expended, because I think this is exactly what we need. We need an opportunity for all of us to learn from each other about the most effective ways of engaging in this now no longer optional form of interaction. Social media is not something that is going to go away. Social media is not something that we can afford to ignore. And I think that your presence here speaks for your realization that that is, in fact, the truth that we live in. But I think that we're all, in a sense, groping, and we're all trying to avoid the pitfalls and maximize the successes. But if I have had a strategy in any of this, it's a strategy that I have derived, or that I believe I've derived from, again, the Holy Apostle Paul, one that he articulates in his, again, first letter to the Corinthians, when he writes, in the 9th chapter, verses 19 to 23, "For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a slave to all, that I might win the more. To the Jews I became as a Jew, in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, not being without law toward God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Tispasi egon apanda, in apandos tinas soso." So there is a kind of a hypnotic quality to being involved, at this level of engagement. This is not, people don't come to me on the internet through my secretaries or through my deacons. They come to me directly. And so one becomes very vulnerable when online in that capacity. I'm not suggesting this is a model for other hierarchs. In fact, I very often regret having put my foot on the path, because it's as time-consuming as it is. It requires daily moderation or accommodation and correction. Sometimes, if the times are particularly lively, hourly. So I'm not suggesting that this is viable for others, but I'm saying that this is a path that, for me, the goal is not, it's not a particular destination, it's the journey itself. And so my involvement is a kind of a education about myself. Yes. Yes. Is that okay? Okay. Okay.